whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Welcome to Talking Horror with Jamie and Nikisha.
Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Nikisha, and this is Talking Horror with Jamie,
And Nikisha.
where we share our love for spooky things and talk horror through the lens of human behavior. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
And we cordially invite you to sit at our table as we discuss the 2022 American Black comedy horror film, The Menu. I don't know why it's in a scary way, but The Menu. Good. So this movie was directed by Mark Malloy and written by Seth Rice and Will Tracy, and it's based on an original story created by Will Tracy, and it features an ensemble cast with he who shall not be named, so they call him Chef Ray Fiennes, and with his beautiful assistant Hung Chow, and it stars the dining guests, just to name a few: our favorite Anya Taylor-Joy, Nicholas Hoult, Janik McTeer, Reed Birney, Judith Light, and John Leguizamo. Yay!
I'm always delighted when he's in a movie. He was also in Violent Night this last year. He just adds a different layer to the movie, especially after. Oh, did you watch it with us, Nikisha? His Broadway show that they filmed. Why can't I think of it?
No.
So good. If you haven't watched it, I'll look it up. Sorry, that was a tangent. Go back to the menu.
Well, I mean, we can always stop for John. I mean, it's necessary. He is that guy, and a delight to see him, as well as some other people that I've seen in other things in this movie. So it was really nice to have this kind of ensemble for this particular type of movie, which we'll get into in likes and gripes. So obviously heavy spoilers for The Menu. If you haven't watched it, y'all, it's streaming on HBO. So go get that handled and then come back and listen to us talk about it. And Jamie, I'm sure there are so many trigger warnings, so please get started.
Yeah, I mean, just like a generally upsetting theme, I would say overall. Thematically, just like, distasteful and unpleasant. Distasteful. Ha! That's funny. The Menu. Coming in hot with the jokes. I mean, there are certainly insides on the outsides. There are, people being maimed and attacked. There are images of suicide and self-harm, many of them. There are people on fire, a la s'mores.
A la mode.
Yes.
I love mode.
Yeah, people a la mode is not a dish that I would like to order at a restaurant. Did I miss anything? It's a lot of insides on the outside.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good amount of
Infidelity. I don't know.
Yeah. Lots of things.
I don't know.
Abuse, sexual abuse,
Yes.
conversations.
Yes.
Yes. Grand. Well, a lot of things to absolutely get into with The Menu, but before we get into everything, producer Brian, do you want to tell us some things?
I would always like to tell some things. We are on YouTube. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
But you can find us wherever you find things. We're there, especially on social media at Talk Horror Pod. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We're having a ton of fun on TikTok. We are doing some supplemental reviews and some fun videos there. So check all the horror content out there as well. Back to you, Nikisha.
Beautiful. So, before we get into everything that is The Menu, have you guys watched anything new this week? Any trailers? I feel like 2023 dropped and everyone was like, horror trailers in movies. So is there anything that you guys have watched this week?
A couple things. I finally finished The Pale Blue Eye, and if you follow us on TikTok, you can see my full review there. But I was pretty disappointed by it. I know if you listen to one of our previous episodes, I only watched the first half when we recorded it, and I was really into the first half. I was very, very disappointed by the second half, and I'm gonna. Does anyone mind if I release some spoilers for The Pale Blue Eye here?
Go ahead.
No. Okay, so just spoilers for The Pale Blue Eye. In the end, it turned out that the murderer was actually the Christian Bale character. And his motivations were that his daughter was raped by some of the cadets. And he wanted to get revenge on them. And to be totally honest, I was so over that being kind of the motivation, the like revenge type of thing. The performances were excellent in it, don't get me wrong. And I liked the you know, I didn't read the book, it's the novel that it's based on. And I'm sure that was sharper and had more commentary and was a little bit more insightful. But I was just so disgusted and over just like rape as like the justification for like these stories and whatnot. Like I just was like, this is not the movie that I wanted, nor was this the movie I signed up for, nor was this the movie that was presented to me. The twist felt just like, well, this is what happens in the early, you know, the late 1800 or whatever it is. I was just very much over it. It really bothered me. But if the story was told in a more refined fashion, I just thought the second half of the movie was just poorly edited. It was convoluted. There was still 20 minutes left of the movie once they thought they solved the crime, and it was like, okay, I know another twist is coming because there's 20 minutes left of this movie.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the bad thing about streaming it, because I could see the runtime on it as opposed to seeing it in movie theaters where like maybe I think that the movie's coming to a close. But I really didn't enjoy this. I thought the first half was gorgeous, and the gothic aspects of it were wonderful, and it was this weird occult murder mystery with excellent performances and Edgar Allan Poe in it, and then it just like became the same old revenge rape plot lines that I'm just like over and sick of, that just like didn't add anything new to that genre. It was just there for the twist, and like I really didn't care at all. So that was unfortunate about that. But on the flip side of things, I think we mentioned previously, we saw the trailer for Missing. That's going to be kind of like a spiritual sequel to Searching. But I didn't realize that it was coming out so soon. By the time you're listening to us, it's already out. So I'm really excited to watch that one. I don't know if we'll get to see it in movie theaters, but like I didn't know it was coming out so soon. How delightful.
Yes. Well, speaking of trailers, I finally got the opportunity to watch the new Evil Dead trailer.
Cool.
And I'm just so excited about our watch through of the whole thing, because I feel like this is going to be right up my alley of the kind of horror that I just need in my life. And I'm super, super excited for all things Evil Dead. So ready to get into it.
Oh, I'm really excited for you to watch all of those.
Oh yeah, I'm very curious to see what you'll think of like the original trilogy and then like the new, more contemporary ones that have been coming out.
Yeah.
Because I'm a fan of all of it. Plus, there's a whole TV series that got canceled. So there's not, you don't have to watch the show. It's okay. But listeners out there who have watched the show, I appreciate you, because it's a fun time.
So just so you know, listeners, as the producer, I have to tell you this. Later this year, we will be doing all of the Evil Dead movies. The Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, Evil Dead 2013, and then Evil Dead Rise. So we're doing all of those so Nikisha can catch up before we watch Evil Dead Rise. Yes. I'm very excited for that, especially to see what you react to positively and what isn't for you, because I feel like while these all feel the same, like they truly feel a part of one, it's pretty incredible. They're all different in tone, and I'm very excited to see what you are attracted to.
Nice. What year, do y'all know the year the first one came out?
81.
Ooh.
And then the second one is 87. The third one is 92, and then 2013, and then 2023.
Okay. I guess I didn't realize how that it was an 80s movie. I don't know why I thought it was late 90s, but even more fantastic. Here for it. Ready for the journey with you guys. It's going to be a good time. So you guys make sure that you listen when those episodes drop. But now, do you have any other things that you have watched, guys?
Jimmy, did we watch anything else?
I don't think so.
Oh, Sick. But you've heard that episode at this point.
Yes. Everybody's thoughts on that,
Yes.
that one. Beautiful. Well, let's get into everything that is the menu, guys, because it's a lot to cover. There was like 80 million courses, and we got to get through all of them.
I know. Well, Nikisha, can you hold on just 1 second?
Yes.
Excuse me. You can talk amongst yourself. I'll be right back. This can stay in the episode. It's totally fine.
Oh, I don't. I don't know what's about to happen, and I don't know if I like it.
Is he going to get an apron?
There's some rustling happening behind the scenes. He's not on camera, so
Right,
we
he's
don't know
not
what
back
he's
yet.
doing. So we're all on this journey together. Oh boy! Oh man, Chef Brian is here.
Chef producer Brian here.
For those of you listening, I would highly suggest checking out the YouTube channel right now. I'm in my chef gear, my chef outfit. I have a hat, but my hair looked good today, so I'm not going to put the hat on.
Yes, chef.
Yes, chef. Multi-hyphen, chef and producer. Okay, Brian, but where did you get this from?
I think I bought this on Amazon for a Halloween costume.
What was the Halloween costume?
It was a cosplay that we were gonna do.
Oh, that's right. I bought this to do an Everything Everywhere All at Once cosplay for Comic-Con.
Yes.
You were gonna be Raccoony.
Raccoony Tooie or whatever it is. Yeah.
Raccoony and the chef.
And the chef. And then it never worked out. But I still have it and I love it.
I mean, this is absolutely perfect content. So now you need
I
to do
know.
some TikToks with this as well on.
100%. Oh my God, Nikisha.
You should have done your menu
TikTok in this. Oh, I'm so mad. I'm gonna have to refilm. I may have to do a remake of it.
I was gonna take it
man.
down and do it again with that.
But it did so well. It did so well. I
Yeah,
can't take it down.
don't do
Okay,
that.
okay,
Don't
okay,
do
okay.
that.
All right, cool. We'll leave it. Next time.
Anyway,
Oh man.
Beautiful. Well, let's get into it, and we need a 2-minute plot summary of the menu. So, who's it gonna be?
What's the plot?
I feel like I am owed one.
I
feel
think
like
you're due.
Owe one.
I think
yeah.
you're due.
I'll do my best.
Okay. 2-minute plot summary for the menu in 3. I opened the calculator. I'm an idiot. In 3. In 3, 2, 1, go. I said,
Can you restart that? What did you say, Gar?
I said go and
Did you say
start.
go in Australian?
I said, grr. I said go and start at the same time. What an awful.
All right, I gotta redo.
Okay. 3,
That was perfect.
2, 1, start.
Okay, so we have Anya Taylor-Joy and Nicholas Hoult, our guests traveling by boat to this exclusive restaurant owned by this celebrity chef, Julian Slowick. A bunch of other exclusive guests are on this boat that are going to the restaurant too. There's a food critic and her editor. There's this couple who are regulars, a movie star and his assistant, and then a group of business partners that are attending the hotel. They're given a tour by Elsa, who is his the chef's main assistant, and then they're in for their meal. All the courses are like really elaborate, but there's these monologues that the chef is giving, and they get more and more disturbing as time goes on. And then shit hits the fan, and one of the sous chefs kills himself in front of the guests.
1 minute.
One of the meals, and the older couple tries to run away, but they cut off his finger. Then we learn that the investor is a juvie head, and so the chef kills him, and everyone has to watch. Then one of the courses, a another
30
sous chef
seconds.
who was sexually harassed by him, stabs him, and all the men have a chance to escape, and all the women stay together and bond. Then things continue to escalate because Anya Taylor-Joy's character isn't actually supposed to be there, and the chef is trying to see, like, what side are you on? Are you on our side or their side? And then she, like, kind of escapes and then tries to call for help, and it doesn't work out, and then everyone becomes really into it, and then she escapes, and then s'mores.
And then s'mores.
I panicked. Yeah.
Right.
Perhaps maybe watch the
Right.
movie and don't take our word for it.
That's the plot.
Ooh, that's terrible. There's so much that's happening in this. It's very hard to summarize.
I've
in
figured out
2 minutes.
I figured out our plot problem.
Too
And
much
this is because,
setup.
because well, yeah, that's true. But I also do this. There's so much to each movie, and like I forgot to just tell the plot of the movie. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but I will say that, like, my question for you is, a lot of people listen to the plot summary on this podcast because they don't like horror movies. They don't watch horror movies. Before we even get into likes and gripes, what % of this do you think is horror movie? We talked about this question with The Northman as well. Like, what % of this is horror movie? Because I feel like people are turned off by the term horror movie sometimes, but I know people specifically who watch this movie thinking it either A, was just a pure horror movie and they weren't interested in watching it, and then did and were like, oh wow, I enjoyed this more than I thought I would, or B, watched it thinking it was just some like movie about a fancy restaurant and like a drama, and then get the horror out of it and like didn't even realize it was a full horror movie. For you, what % of this is horror for our listeners who have not potentially watched it and do want to check it out on HBO Max?
Well, of course, this is all subjective because we are horror people. So I would say that for me, the percentages was 70-30, 30% on the horror. And this is what I talk about in my likes and gripes. I wanted like a little bit more of horror things. So I think that you get a good amount, as I would equate this as to like an action thriller and the deaths and things that you would get in that, but it's not the sole purpose or the sole basis of it. So for me, it's 70-30.
Jamie?
How about you, Jamie?
I feel like that's such a good question, because in my subjective opinion, I feel like the whole thing is horror because the intention is to elicit not only fear, which there are some moments of fear, but also like disgust and like feeling uncomfortable and rejecting something. That's also, in my opinion, horror. And so like this whole movie, I feel like it's a horror comedy and a black comedy, but I feel like the whole thing is horror because the whole thing is making you uncomfortable, like reflecting on the impact of this industry and how it's affected this chef, how like just the class of it all, and like scrutinizing, you know, the people who are there and the things that they've done. All of that makes me uncomfortable. And so like all of it for me reflects as horror, but it's not a slasher horror. It's not like, I think you have to think about it in terms of genre. And so I think you can say like it is horror, at least for me, it's horror, but there's also black comedy elements. There's also like, it's like, this isn't a slasher. This isn't body horror. I think you can like explain it that way to give more context. But for me, it's 100%.
Yeah.
Sure.
What about
That's
you,
a good
Brian?
answer. I tend to side with Jamie. I think that was a really good description of it. I think that for me, I'm of the opinion that anything is a horror movie if it scares you. If you're watching Sophie's Choice and you're very deeply affected by the Holocaust, Schindler's List, like those can be considered horror movies if they're affecting you. You know what I mean? But obviously then there are ones that are specifically designed, like Smile, like Jamie had mentioned, slashers in general. Like those are horror movies, but we can more easily define those as horror movies. So to me, this one is anywhere from 50% to 100% a horror movie. For me, this is probably like 90 to 100% a horror movie. Because of what the intent behind it is. But like if somebody came to me and said like, this just felt like a thriller, that like had horrifying moments, I'd be like, yeah, absolutely, totally, super cool, I love it. And then I would say, yes, chef. Also, as somebody who's worked in the restaurant industry for a long time, like a lot of movies or TV shows that take place in and around restaurants just give me a lot of anxiety in general. And this one is like clearly trying to be horrifying in some places, and thematically, I think it's horrifying. Plus, just to remind our listeners, the director of this movie also directed a ton of Succession episodes. Therefore, this is like the what it's trying to say and do is to me very similar to what the if you watch Succession as a satire, as a black comedy, exactly what this movie is trying to do in a very different way. Because I feel like, and maybe I'm getting too much into likes and gripes, but I just wanted to preface this before Nikisha passes it to likes and gripes with the fact that the things like Succession and this, I feel like the point of entry, and I have another question for you, the point of entry is elevated. The point of entry, you think like you're watching this movie about like rich people at a restaurant, or with Succession, you feel like you're watching a TV show about these like selfish, rich people who own businesses, and you can't really get into it and you can't empathize with them. And the same thing with this movie. My conversation with that is that's not the point. The point of this and that are that you are supposed to not empathize with these people. There's supposed to be some enjoyment in watching the 1% be idiots and like be like murdered and killed, or be presented with these awful situations that make you laugh because you're laughing at them, make you uncomfortable because you would never be in a situation like that with that amount of money and stuff like that. And I think that some people are like, this is too elevated. It's just like stupid. Like to me, this is not an elevated horror movie. This is just like that restaurant. This is presented marketing wise as an elevated thing. But when it comes down to it, it's just a straightforward, like horror satire, especially because the point of view that we're coming into from this movie is the one person that's not supposed to be there. That's the whole point of this, that we're watching all of this 1% around us with all of their like rich people problems, that outside of their bubble are actually really horrible things. Like we're watching it from that perspective, so I'm not supposed to empathize with these people. If anything, I empathize with the chef a little bit more. Yeah, chef. But like, I just wanted to like do that because I've seen a lot of conversation online about that, and that's not how I see this movie at all. Back to you, Nikisha.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no, that's all great. On that note, likes and gripes.
Yes,
Yes,
chef.
Nikisha.
And now our likes and gripes.
Let's get into it. I am glad that, Brian, you were already bringing up some great points about the tone of the movie. So I just want to piggyback off of that. And I think out of a lot of movies that I've seen in a long time, I think that this is a perfect balance of tone as far as dark comedy and horror. Even though I said at the beginning I would have liked a little bit more gore, like in layman's terms of like what horror is and what you expect when you hear the word horror, I wanted just a little bit more of that. And I think that's probably my only real gripe that I have with this movie. But I also want to preface in saying that with this podcast now, I watch movies differently. And so,
Ooh, tell me more.
yes. And so I'm always trying to think of questions to ask Jamie. And so my mind immediately is always spinning on the mental health aspect. And with that, when things pop up, I'm like pressing pause or like writing notes or trying to like get my thoughts together. And so I'm not enjoying the movie as a whole cohesive moment. Especially with streaming stuff. Like if I'm in a movie theater, like of course I have to sit and watch the whole thing, but then I'm just like sitting on the back row, like writing notes on, like, on a pen pad, just trying to make sure, because I don't want to lose some of my thoughts that I have in the moment. But all that to say is that with this movie, I wish I was more invested in just watching it as a cohesive piece, as opposed to just thinking about, okay, what can I ask on this podcast that we can talk about that's mental health? Because with that, it was a lot of stop and starting, or me like writing notes in the middle of something and something really cool would happen that I feel like I would have taken in better if I was just watching it as a whole, as opposed to, oh, let me go back and look at what happened. Does that make sense?
Wait, Nikisha, have I ruined movie watching for you?
No.
I'm going
Wow,
to like.
thanks, Brian.
This is the last episode. I don't want to take that away from you.
No, but that's absolutely like a me thing. I need to make sure I can have my thoughts together. But
I did this to you. No.
But all that to say is that I feel like I would have enjoyed this movie even more if I would have just sat and let myself be immersed in the moment, which I feel like can be a lesson in life. You know, stay in the present moment. You know, things aren't that serious. But with that, there was just some things that I wanted more of, like the horror things. But again, I think that's just like how I was watching the movie. The things that I loved about this, which was a lot, I loved the title card and how it was like the production company introduces the menu. Genius. Already there, right off the bat, I'm with you. I love the cast. I've already said that before from various things, so it was really good seeing them all together in this moment, and I think it was a great combination of things. I also think that it was really nice that you still have horror tropes in this movie. Like, you have like the broy bros that are going to make the dumb decisions and probably die first, you know, and you have like the really snobby couples that are regulars there, and then you have like the quote unquote brunette final girl that, you know, like she's probably going to live in the whole thing. And there was some really, really great, very kind of meaningful quotes in this. One of my favorite ones was when the chef said, "We are but a frightened nanosecond. Nature is timeless." And I was like, whew. That is a great quote, and oh my gosh, wow, he is going to kill everybody. This is
Yes, chef.
the time. Yes, chef.
Oh,
And
Nikisha,
also-
I thought of a term for when you want more gore. It's called morror.
Morror, great. Morror, please. More gore, morror. I need
Morror.
it in this. Morror.
Morror. Let's make that a thing.
We're
Morror.
gonna make it-
I love that. Sometimes you
Hashtag
just want
horror.
hashtag morror. Sometimes you just want more of the gore, so it's morror. I mean gore morror, but no, morror.
Morror,
Because you
I
can want
like
other
morror.
things other than gore. Morror. Yeah, cool.
Yes, yes.
Giving me a headache.
I do love, and we talk about this a lot, the trailer versus the final product. And I really enjoy that the trailer, like Brian mentioned earlier, you're getting exactly what you are coming in for. But I also love that it's not giving it all away. So you know that shit is going to go down, but you don't know in what capacity and if it's going to be like, are we picking people off one by one? Which is, I will say, I also enjoyed that it wasn't that either. It was a matter of like, we are all dying, for the most part, we are all dying at one time. And it's going to be at the end with this beautiful midsummer, we're all going to be on fire type thing, which I thoroughly enjoy. So it was really nice that it wasn't like, who's going to die first? Who's going to be one of the customers? No, everybody is, you know, gone. So I really love that was the concept. And I love the tension building in this. And another quote that I really enjoyed was the one about student loans when he asked the girl, he's like, "Did you go to college?" Or he said, "What college did you go to?" And she's like, "Brown or whatever." And he's like, "Do you have student loans?" And she said, "No." And she's like, "No student loans? You're dying." So super great. I love the title cards of introducing all of the dishes and what were in all of them. I thought that was just a great kind of breakaway of setting up what's going to happen and how crazy everything got as we continued on. I absolutely need a prequel because I want to know how the chef got to this point and how all of the other sous chefs were like, yeah, dude, this is exactly what we want to do. We're going to like all do this and then die for you. So I just would really love if that somebody could make that happen. But again, I will say a lot of people were raving about this movie and it was great. And I had a great time watching it. And I enjoyed it. But the way that people were raving about this movie, at least the people that I have spoken to, made me think it was going to be kind of more on the level of like Hereditary or Midsummer type moment. And when it wasn't, it was like, oh, okay. not to say that made me dislike it, but it was just something different than what I expected it to be. So now after having watching it and being like, oh, this is what this is, I still had a good time, but my expectations were a little bit higher for it, just how people were talking about the movie. But all in all, I absolutely loved everything about it. I think it was a great lesson in the balance of having good comedy and horror and it being successful. And I think that is attributed to the cast as well, because they were great performances by everyone. And, you know, we love Voldemort. So there you go.
Nikisha, I have a question for you. If would you watch this a second time? And if you did watch this a second time, do you think you would enjoy it more? Because I didn't force you to take notes.
Yes and yes. I honestly would recommend it to a lot of people, and I would say, yes, I will watch this with you because I had a good time watching it, and I think I would have like a better time just like sitting and letting. But Brian, that is not your fault. That is how my brain works. I'm like, okay, we have to make sure that we have a really good discussion on brain. So like, what questions can I ask Jamie? And so it's like a deep dive into the mental. But that's what I like about it, and that's why I like about this podcast. That's why we're doing this, you know, because we can talk about the human behavior and stuff. So
I just imagine a world in which we're watching like the next movie we're gonna watch, whatever it is, and like me like turning to Jamie or Jamie turning to me while watching, like, you think Nikisha's enjoying this because she has to take notes during the Sixth Sense.
No, truly, just because I know I'll forget something and I'll be mad.
Yeah.
I'll be like, oh, that was a great question, and I forgot it in the moment, so I have to like pause and make sure I write it down.
Totally.
But I really enjoyed this movie. It's all good. Jamie, do you want to go?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I also I feel like I feel similarly of like there was so much hype for it and I enjoyed this movie, but I don't think I enjoyed it as much as like Brian did. He was like eating it up. See, I'm still funny next to me while we were watching it. But I still like, I have a really fun time. The performances were all like really excellent. It was interesting to see like where it was all going to go. I also was like reflecting on my own experiences dining out, and like I've never worked in the food service industry, and I've never been to like a very expensive or exclusive restaurant, like anything related to this. So for me, I also was like trying to, I think it's also hard to have empathy for characters who are all really awful and hard to empathize with. And you're like, oh, I want them all to die. But it's also hard, I think, to like empathize with even this kind of setting if you just like where there isn't that any of that connection to it. So like I feel like disconnected from like this whole class conversation, also from the food service industry, like connection that I'm learning that people have had. And so like, I feel like as someone who felt disconnected from a lot of the threads that existed within the movie, it was still like enjoyable, but like, I don't know, there was just something missing for me that I can't even name or articulate. And it might just be based on like experientially something that I haven't experienced. And so like, it's harder like my gripe is something that they address in the movie, but I still have a hard time like buying into how they are all bought into it at the end. So like the idea that nobody tries to escape for most of it, and they're like, you know, what does it mean for somebody to like be taking this experience in and not fight back? And then at the end for them to like actually be bought into, you know, the meaning behind what the chef is doing and the fact that like they all have to die. And I just have a really hard time as somebody who works with people who like, you know, my whole like passion and business model is all about like helping people live and thrive. I'm like, I have a hard time. Like what is it about his message that like resonated with people at the end where where the guests themselves are like, yes, chef. And they have two joined with like, it's not just about sides anymore. They're all joined in together. So like that, there's something where like, and I don't know if maybe when like Brian gets into his likes and gripes or when we kind of talk about like the brains of it all, but like that was a really challenging part for me to like kind of sit with and walk away okay with this, because like I feel like that takes me out in terms of like what people would do in that situation, especially these type of people who like we're already getting that they are, you know, at this like higher echelon of class that like I just don't like I don't think that they are perceiving things in that same way. Like they could still be afraid of what like Chef Slowick is presenting to them, and like and then maybe even learn a little bit about like why he's become this person, why this has become his mission. But I just don't see them like buying into agreeing with it all at the end and being complacent. And like that is my biggest gripe with this. And maybe that means that I like miss the mark, but that's just for me. I would still absolutely recommend this to people, especially because I'm such a huge fan of Succession. That's like one of my favorite shows that's on TV. And like this very much is in the same lane. But yeah, I feel like something was missing for me personally, even though it was overall a very enjoyable watch. So I hope that was specific enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That was great. I mean, and that's such a great point too. You talking about being removed from the service industry and what that life is, because I mean, it doesn't take much to sympathize with a situation, and when people are going through problems, like that doesn't mean you have to have the same experience, but it does make sense not being a part of the world. And so what does that mean when you are not affiliated with the world, and how do you take that in watching it from your own perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like the empathy question for everyone is like, you know, for people who struggle with empathizing with people that have different experiences or are different from them. It's like, how do you like connect on the same level when you yourself haven't had that experience? And like, for some people, it's really challenging because like they don't share that lived experience. And so it's harder to like, you know, really put themselves in that person's shoes without any of that, you know, that they've been through themselves. So like, and it's not that I don't empathize. It's more of just like I don't understand the like that culture, the restaurant culture, and like the way in which like I understand like the family dynamic, but like it's just like unwavering following of this chef that's the part I don't understand. And like even within the complicated, like, you know, he was sexually harassing one of his staff members, and like her still like, you know, being so dedicated to him and this craft. It's like, you know, I would understand a world where she would be so turned off by all of this and like walk away, but she didn't. And like, I'm like, I want to know more about why, like what's going on here. Like what it almost feels like I mean, now that I'm saying it, I'm like, duh. It's like the cycle of power and violence, and like, you know, how power is just so like people crave power and being around power, and like, you know, you can excuse some of these things because of that. And again, we don't get enough of like her character to like figure out what's going on, but like those are things that like I don't have any experience with. So like I'm very curious about like what is that culture like where everyone is like following this person, and like whatever they say they will do it. I mean, he even an outsider like Nicholas Holt's character, who's like, you know, looks up to this chef so much, and he's not even a part of it, but he's like, he becomes obsessed with it and is so in awe of what the chef is doing that when he himself gets put into the position, he's very easily like influenced in terms of when the chef like, you know, insults him and embarrasses him, but then also we're going to assume that he like orders him to kill himself, that he does it too. It's like, how this influence is so powerful. Like, how did we get here? So it's like, I'm just like so curious about that, because like I can't fully understand it.
And I think that's to the point of the movie too, like the absurdity of it, like the extreme nature of it, but how we're not really that far removed, because you can attribute that to like Trump supporters, and how someone who does something so outlandish, and people are still just, yes, I will do whatever you say. I will give you my firstborn child, type situation. Or even just in like different kind of cults and stuff that, we've discovered throughout the years and documentaries on. But, and before we get to Brian, I do want to just add on to your ending point too, Jamie, about the customers joining in with it, because I also think that adds to the absurdity and the satire of it all. Because at first I was thinking, like, why are these people just like, okay, put a marshmallow on me and put a crown of chocolate on my head, and I'm just going to sit here and chill and not fight it. I mean, of course, the whole movie, they're like, okay, we obviously know we can't escape. So, like, you kind of accept your fate in that way. But even still, I think that it's such, I think it's a testament to the tone of the movie that at the end, everyone is just like in an absurd way, accepting everything and saying, yes, chef. And I think that's just like the point of it. Like, this is so outlandish. And like, this is, the ending. People are accepting their fate, just like all these two chefs have accepted, their fate in it. But Brian, would you like to go on your Chef Brian?
Chef Brian.
Chef.
Yes. So I loved this movie. If I had seen this before we did our top 10, this would have easily cracked my top 5. No question. I loved this movie. I very much understood it, like, to a deep core level for many reasons. But I'm actually going to start with my gripes, because that's where you all ended, just to do a little bit more of a flow here. I agree. I actually wrote on in my notes, why are they all complacent? They're not even fighting back. I think one of my likes, though, is that he actually brings it up. Like, he has that line. It's like, haven't you even thought about why you're like, haven't like tried to escape, really? And I thought that was interesting. But I do think that just also, again, that's a part of the satire of it. I don't necessarily think that feels natural, but then again, I don't necessarily think that that's the point. The point is that this is satire. To address the ending, I do think that the ending isn't totally clear and believable in some ways. When it comes to all of the clientele and the actual customers in the restaurant, I do think that there's a couple things that we can think about when, dissecting this ending. The one thing is that I think all of these people knew they deserved it. I think they all accepted their fates long before they ever had a restaurant experience here. I think that they're people who nothing will satisfy them. I think you have the older couple whose daughter ran away, and there's also a question of whether the father sexually assaulted the daughter, and that, because you have that that moment of seeing on the tortillas, him in the room with the Anya Taylor-Joy character and asking her to pretend to be the daughter. Is that just some sort of a weird sexual fantasy? Did he hire her just to pretend that his daughter was actually there? But then again, he's still, doing sexual things in and around this, this playtime, if you will. So the role playing. So you have that aspect of things. You have the bros, the actual bros of the finance bros, who are just like, they don't care about anything. They don't care about their women. They don't care about, the way they talk about them and all of that. And they know that, they're gross. The assistant knows that she's been cheating him. He knows that his assistant has been cheating him. Like all these people in this room, the critic knows that she's full of shit, and then the assistant knows that she's full of shit, but they still put on these masks, if you will, and down at their core they know who they are. So I think that everyone knew they deserved it. I also think there's an element of nothing will satisfy them. And, this is part of, they don't care. This is part of the experience. This is something they paid for, that their money, and they don't just do, because I think the juxtaposition of the end of this movie is that Anya Taylor-Joy's Margot character actually satisfies the chef, whereas everyone in that room never feels like they can be satisfied. Now, I think there's a lot to think about there, but I do think that everybody in that room is at a totally different level, and I don't think that the movie does a good enough job, if we're taking it face value, at all of them saying yes, chef at the end. Satire-wise, I understand that and believe that, and that's why it was satisfying to me, but I completely agree with you that the movie doesn't do enough work to individually convert each person in that room. I do think that at the end, when the Coast Guard comes in and they're all excited, and then they realize that the Coast Guard is working for the chef and there's no way they're getting out, I think that breaks all of their spirits. And I think that is when they all just accept what's going to happen here. Because nobody has anything to live for. The film bros have nothing to live for because... excuse me, not the film bros. I'll get into that in a second. The finance bros have nothing to live for because they're financially successful, but they did it all in a cheat. Their angel investor has just died outside. Plus they've ruined all of their relationships with the women in their lives. Calling Dr. Sunshine from the Leguizamo character. Like he puts so much onus on who he is as a famous person, and he puts on this like humble, like, oh, I don't want to be bothered, like type of thing, but like he needs people to come up to him, and he doesn't have that life anymore. Their daughter left, like they're just like, you know what, these tortillas reminded me of why my life is so crappy, that I'm just going to buy into this experience and be satisfied of being a part of this person's final creation. And if we get to the food bro, who is one of my favorite characters in this, the Nicholas Hoult character, because it reminds me of a small faction of film bros that they just buy into whatever they're seeing and just like fully obsess about it. But they see the wrong side of things. Some examples I have here are The Office. That's What She Said has turned into something funny when it was originally a satire of the fact that Michael Scott doesn't understand etiquette and like office space and how you're supposed to be. It's so inappropriate, but now it's turned into his own meme because we've all taken it, to be funny, but like that wasn't its original intent. You have things like The Boys. The Boys is a scathing satire of marketing in this country and the elite and how people absorb things, and people love Homelander. Like they have tattoos and like, no, like he is like, because they buy into it and they're watching it for the wrong reasons. You have things like Girls, a pure satire of these selfish, obnoxious people. I love Girls. Girls is one of my favorite shows of all time.
I hate it.
But I watch it like
That's
this.
horror.
Yeah, that's horror. But I watch it like this, where the characters are just palatable enough for me to get through the episodes, but I recognize what the show is trying to do with them. This movie is a good example of that. The White Lotus. We all enjoy all of that stuff, but really just a scathing satire of the 1% at these communities and and these resorts. And then of course, spoiler, this is my suggestion at the end. American Psycho is the perfect example of this. That is a scathing look at finance bros and all of that. And it is clearly breaking all of that down. But people like all of a sudden, like, we love this character. We love, like the whole business cards thing where like there's the ego there. Like, I really bought into Nicholas Holt's performance in this because that is a very real thing. So let me slide into my likes. I love the pacing of this. I love the subtitles in terms of like how they're eating, and the descriptive nature of the subtitles was amazing if you watch with that. The food was gorgeous, like Hannibal level beautifully filmed. The acting was superb. The slow burn of information we got, even though Jamie and I figured it out like 10 minutes into the movie, because there's a lot of moments where at the beginning of the movie, the older couple says like, oh, we're not going to go on the tour. We're just going to go to the restaurant. We've been here before. It sets up who they are, what types of characters they've been, but also it separates Margot and the Nicholas Hoult character from them because she clearly recognized them at the beginning. So something's going on there. And then we find out that like she, someone else was supposed to be there and his ex-girlfriend, blah, blah, blah. Like when she's checking in, all of that, like we figured out that she's the one person that's not supposed to be there. But like that didn't ruin our experience at all watching this. But I like the slow burn of information. I like how it just gets started. There's exposition is told throughout the movie. There's not an expo dump at the beginning, realistically. I loved the Tyler cooking scene where he makes him very uncomfortable. He's like and it feels like people online being like, "Oh, I hated your movie, bro." It's like, well, why don't you make your own movie? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, like that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
I loved all the quippy lines. I loved that the characters felt like they could quote Martin Luther King Jr. in an instance like this. Like again, satire. We take words that are meaningful to certain people and should be meaningful to all of us and like make it about ourselves. I love the calling Dr. Sunshine stuff. And as a restaurant person, that movie ruined his one day off when you're working long hours. like, Nikisha, I'm sure you can relate to that. Like, your Mondays off. Like, I saw this terrible movie. Like, I kind of wasted 3 hours of my only day off this week. I get that.
Such a great line. Yes.
I know. I love the balance of hatred of the characters, but making them palatable, as I previously mentioned. And I think what separates this movie from a lot of other movies is the ending. I found this movie pretty predictable all the way through, as I previously mentioned. However, I think that her seeing that photo and then her escape plan was to satisfy him in a way that he had never been satisfied, because so much of the movie's theme is love versus obsession. When does your love stop being a love and it becomes just something you are obligated to do? And her being able to, like, have him cook and be like, you know what, you gave me this, you're not like them, you've chosen us, and like, I will let you go. And like the concept around like, I'd like it to go, please. That they're, again, putting on this mask of like talking in restaurant terms, even though there's so much happening below the surface. Absolutely love that. I also think that there's a version of this movie where, because they previously mentioned that, like, if you underserve the meat will, the bacteria in the meat will kill you, that like he actually killed her with that hamburger because he cooked the aged meat wasn't aged enough. However, Jamie sent me a TikTok that confirmed that the writers and the director talked about how, like, that is not their intention at all. That was just to set up the danger of the food, like a Willy Wonka. Like, is this man dangerous? Is this man not dangerous? And that they're playing with like lives within days of each other. And I appreciated that totally. But I think if you watch this movie thinking that he killed her, I think it's still pretty powerful. And then, of course, we need to get to the quotes.
Yes.
The quotes. A small bite for the last person to be caught. Chef's kiss. I know you CC'd me on it. Chef's kiss. All of Tyler's quotes in the kitchen. Chef's kiss. Especially when the chef goes, this is a new dissective method of which we have been woefully ignorant. Like, just like making fun of him. Chef's kiss.
Oh my God.
But then my favorite line in this whole movie, which I think sums this up so perfectly, and Nikisha, you mentioned it earlier in this episode, but I'm going to actually quote it because I did go back and write it down.
Yes.
The s'mores quote. Unethically sourced chocolate and gelatinized sugar water, imprisoned by industrial-grade graham cracker. It's everything wrong with us, and yet we associate it with our innocence, with childhood, mom and dad. But what transformed this fucking monstrosity is fire. And then he starts it by saying, the most offensive assault on the human palate ever contrived. Truly, truly, truly... I love even just like the sound editing of this with the claps, with the Yes Chef getting the bell curve of Yes Chef, it being kind of like pretty impressive that he has this whole like chefs with him. And then it kind of gets scarier. And then at the end, it becomes something that they do. I think this is a perfect film. I loved this movie, even with its flaws. I think its flaws make it more interesting. Perfect movies to me are not as interesting as movie with flaws that I can consider perfect. Truly love this movie. I loved it. I'm Yes Chef.
Yes, Chef.
3 Michelin stars from this guy.
Yes. Well, let's get into brains. Tasty.
Wait, question. What's scarier? This chef's clap or the double clap from The Conjuring?
Oh, wow.
Oh, man.
That's hard. Because there's so much tension in the chef's clap. I don't know.
It like reverberates.
Yes, I was literally about to say, I think it's the sound quality of the one in the menu where you're just like, this is jarring, and then everybody's like response to it. So I think you're right in you talking about like the sound design of this movie. It's great.
Yeah, I think deep in my gut, it's the chef clap. However, the Conjuring clap is obviously has more of the jump scare to it, if you will.
Yes, absolutely.
Jamie, what about you?
Jump scare.
Yeah, I would agree. I think like, especially because like, I hope that it's more likely that I encounter the scary menu clap than the Conjuring clap, because if something is really wrong.
Woo!
Truly. I mean, at least you can get that, like, get your Ed and Lorraine Warren on with The Conjuring, though. With the menu, it's like, well, you're there and you are absolutely going to die. There is no chance of living. I think I'd rather be in The Conjuring. But that's my own opinion. Great. So let's get into it. We're talking about the chef, and I don't think we've done this in a while, but I think we need to Billy or Stu our chef. So, Jamie, can we just start off there? Is he a Billy or a Stu? What are your thoughts?
Movies don't create psychos. Movies make psychos more creative. Yeah, it's a scream, baby.
Billy or Stu?
Definitely a Billy, because he has this whole darn thing planned out. There's nothing off the cuff until like the very end. But no, this is all part of his master plan. Even going to Margot's character constantly and being like, where do you stand? Because like she doesn't fit into his plan. He has to figure out what to do with her. But like other than that, there are no loose ends. He has it all, predetermined.
Beautiful. So he is our good old psychopath, which is great that you mentioned American Psycho, Brian, because I mean, definitely so many similarities in that train of thought, which is great. So I do want to talk, and we kind of briefly mentioned this, but the dangers of mixing like a work life and home life. And I just want you to kind of just talk about how it can affect
good question.
Yeah, see, that's why I be pressing pause, Brian, because I want to ask a question.
That's why Nikisha's taking her notes.
Honestly, I take it back. This is an elevated podcast because we pause and we take notes. We're just trying our best. We're just doing our best.
Hashtag trying our best. But when I was watching this, it was making me think about all the sous chefs because they're all living together. And so I would love for you to just speak on how mixing your home and work life can affect your mental health. And especially when we talk about the pandemic and what that has done with people working from home as opposed to not having that separate, life. And are there good effects or is it all bad? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that like generally, I guess making generalizations is bad, but I'm going to do it in this circumstance because, I'm feeling bold. Yes. Not having, if your entire identity is like riding on your job, then it does make sense. Like when you look at like the sous chef earlier in the fourth course who commits suicide, that like his whole life has been about trying to get to the same level as his like chef idol, and because he's not as good, then he has justified for himself that there is nothing else to live for. Like when you're building everything upon one focus, in this case your job, and like if you're not meeting your own expectations, or like you don't have other things to support you and help you and like replenish your energy and like invest time and skills into other things, like it can cause a lot of harm. Again, we see it with the sous chef, but I think also just, what does it look like? I mean, look at the chef himself. Like, what does it look like when all of his being is just dedicated to serving other people? And then on top of that, when the other people aren't appreciating the things that he's presenting, because so much is dependent on that role, that like he's losing himself. And like, how did he get here? What's the point of this? Like originally when he was flipping those burgers, there was more purpose and passion in that because, he was connecting with people who were enjoying that dish. He felt like his purpose was being fulfilled, and then continuing to like invest more energy into perfecting his skills and talents and becoming this like exclusive chef. He also lost like everything else. He's like literally living there and doing, I mean, it's on an island, so that makes sense, but like, you know, what other space and energy is he putting into like anything else outside of this? It doesn't seem like anything. And while yes, it's this big, you know, elaborate investment and you know, because everything is fresh, everything is like, you know, accessible on this island that he's created. It's still all about the restaurant. It's still all about like his work. And it's not just like, oh, I've enjoyed learning how to like cure meats because that's a fun side hobby I'm having. I've learned how to like, you know, harvest oysters and mussels because like that's a fun side thing. It's like, no, everything is all with the intention of like feeding into this one thing. And again, like if your expectations and your being are all, your identity is all built on this one thing, like when things don't go the way that you're expecting them to go, or like you start to receive criticism, like you might be internalizing that. And like you are then taking that to mean something about yourself, about your identity, about your character. And it can cause a lot of harm with like how you view yourself, your self-esteem, your self-confidence. Like your person is now so integrated with your work identity. Like they are one and the same. And it's bad.
It's bad. No, and I think that's a really good point, because I think during the pandemic we saw the shift in people realizing, especially I will say like in the musical theater industry, of we are not our jobs because they can be taken away from us so quickly. And
sure.
So what is our identity outside of that? And you're kind of forced to figure out like, oh, well, what are my actual hobbies and other interests, because I can't do this. And just because I can't do this doesn't mean that I'm useless. It's like I'm still a human being in this world operating. So how can I continue on, you know, figuring out myself and things without having the set societal standard of, oh, because you're doing this, that means, you know, you're this kind of person, or, you know, and then just kind of like climbing that ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like, you know, creating a strong sense of self is more than just investing energy into your career and like professional growth. What are the other things that like bring you joy? What are the things, who are the people that make you happy, that make you proud? Like, you know, what other accomplishments have you hit? And like whether your strengths outside of just your work, that those are part of the things, whether your actual identities, like are you a parent, are you a child, or like what are the other things that make you you, and like how can you put more energy into that? And I think like, you know, you have folks who were unemployed during the pandemic who like, what happens when you lose your work? And like, if you've over identified with that, like how do you rediscover yourself in a time where you're not able to like access and put energy into your profession? And like, what does that mean about you? And then on the flip side, what I've also seen is folks who lost access to all of their other resources. And so they put more time and energy into their work. But then it's like, because there's no separation between, like, there's no commute, you can just work, you know, whenever, all the time. But how does that also become really unhealthy? Because you're just like using all of your free time. Like maybe you would go out for happy hour with friends after work, or maybe you would go to like a workout class before work. Those things now are lost. And so people are like, I have nothing better to do, I might as well keep working. And that too becoming like really unhealthy at times, because you're not trying to create other space for other things. Those things are lost. We might have lost them, like actually lost them, because we don't have access to them anymore. So a lot of people have had to get like super creative during the pandemic to figure out, how can I still make time for things that make me feel good outside of just this? Because I know I can do this whenever, but like, is it actually helping me to do this all of the time? Or are there other things that I could be doing that like also allow me to like, you know, be the best version of me and like continue to, you know, thrive?
Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's great. I had other questions, but for time, I think what you answered was pretty much kind of the whole theme of the movie. So thank you, Jamie, for that input. And I guess we should do Rotten Tomatoes next, Brian.
Yeah, sure. Rotten Tomatoes. Let's do Rotten Tomatoes. I got nothing. Great, cool.
A good dish that might come along with these Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah,
What would you serve these Rotten Tomatoes with?
A garbage bag.
Yes.
All right. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
It's the Rotten Tomatoes game.
I mean, I've been hearing good reviews. I'm gonna say 90.
Okay. Jamie, what do you think this has?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with 92.
All right. This has an 88% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That was my other guess. Oh, I'm so mad at myself.
While its social commentary relies on basic ingredients, the menu serves up black comedy with plenty of flavor.
Yum.
And then the audience score, if you were interested, is a 76%, which is interesting.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
And they say, the menu's got a great cast and plenty of fun moments, although the ending might strike some as a little tough to swallow. I think we did these two like justice, like right in between.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and I was really interested in the themes of this, like elitism, restaurant culture, entitlement, like serving, being served, class, art, ego, the appeal of like, you know, exclusive elevated meals, celebrity and the idolization of celebrity, and why we're so quick to forgive celebrities faster than we'll forgive ourselves. So Nikisha, I'm really glad that you asked those questions, because my favorite theme, or the one that I was attracted to the most, was obsession versus love. And I thought that Jamie's answer really kind of dug into that. So thank you. But on that note, let's do the 4 S's.
Yeah.
Yes.
Skull, scare, shakes, and suggestions. The Talking Horrors 4 S's.
So we have skulls, scares, shakes, and suggestions. These are how we rank the movies. Skulls is how it handled mental health, human behavior. Skulls, scares is how scary it was. Shakes is how, you know, how much is it going to stick with you? Is this a one and done thing? And then suggestions, things that we would pair this with. Skulls, scares, and shakes is 1 through 10. Jamie, let's start with all of your rankings.
Sure. So for Skulls, I gave it a 5. Again, I know it's satire, but I just have a hard time wrapping my head around people not quite peopling. But there were some moments that seemed like genuine and I would say like authentic and realistic. So kind of middle of the road. For scares, I'm giving it a 3. Not because there were particularly many jump scares, but just like that kind of low underlying feeling uncomfortable for most of this film was present the whole time. So that bumps it up a few points. And for shakes, I'm also going to give it a 5. I've still been thinking about this movie. I feel like there's been a lot more discourse on social media because it's streaming now. So partially because I can't escape the conversations, but also because I am still thinking about it. It's still like simmering in my head. And
Simmering?
Still got it, baby. And yeah, I'm definitely gonna keep processing my thoughts on this for a while.
Sure. Nikisha?
Skulls, I'm going to give it a 7 because of the themes in mental health and how it's been taken, you know, things have been taken to the extreme. Scares, I also gave it a 3. Just because there was some good tension building and, you know, a finger was cut off. So yes, scary. And shakes, I'm going to give it a 6 because I really had a good time and I would absolutely watch this movie again and recommend it to other people. So, yeah.
Cool. I'm pretty similar. I'll give it a 6 for skulls. I gave it a 3 for scares. And maybe I'll give it a 4 because that clap. And then for shakes, this is an 8 for me. I loved this movie. Not like I don't think it ventures into 9 or 10 territory, but it's definitely an 8 or maybe a 9 later dawn. I'll see how I like maybe at the end of this year I'll see if it's still sticking with me, but I'll give it an 8. I already said my suggestion of American Psycho. Jamie, why don't you give some suggestions?
Sure. So I have 2 categories of suggestions. The first one is for films I've actually seen. I like to pair Bodies with this.
Good one.
From a Gen Z millennial lens, but still still critiquing race and class, but obviously not in a yummy kitchen, but during a hurricane party. And then movies that I have not seen, but I am under the impression that they also address critiques on race and class, are The Hunt, which I think came out in 2020. And then this is embarrassing that I still have not seen this film yet, but Parasite.
Jamie.
I know, I'm the worst. I know. There's just so much stuff to watch, and then I just get truly paralyzed because I'm like, I have to watch all the things, and then I just don't watch anything.
Sure.
And that's been perfectionism, procrastination, and paralyzed with Jamie.
All in one.
I feel like that's that I've failed as a husband.
Oh.
Nah.
You'll get
your fault.
It'll be fine.
Nikisha, you're up.
Super easy for eliminating the 1% in classism in a way. The Purge.
Good one.
There with this. And then if you just want some more kind of social commentary, it's mostly on the capitalism side, but I think that's the Satires match is Sorry to Bother You. If you
that's a good one.
Yeah.
We've seen that one. We saw that one in movie theaters.
Oh, no
boy.
way. I can't imagine watching it in movie theaters. I was watching it at home like, what is happening?
Yeah.
But I feel like
That's a good one.
the satire is on the same kind of level. So if you like the satire, then you watch Sorry to Bother You.
Cool. I'm going to throw 2 more in there because I like your idea of like movies you haven't seen yet. Apparently, Triangle of Sadness is about class that I haven't seen.
Too.
And here's one that I have seen that is the opposite of this movie. This is about a love of cooking, and I think you should watch Ratatouille.
I knew you were thinking it.
If you want,
my God.
if you want a
that's so
nicer
funny.
side of the restaurant industry and you don't mind rats cooking your food, I think that Ratatouille is a delightful film. Ratatouille is my favorite Pixar movie, by far. And so Ratatouille. Anyway, back to you, Nikisha.
Friends. Well, that wraps up our episode of The Menu, guys. I hope that you enjoyed all of our different courses, and you can follow us. That just came off the top of my head. You can listen to us on, Brian says that. Sorry. You can follow us on all the social medias, TikTok, Instagram, all the things at Talk Horror Pod. And Brian, where can they listen to us?
You can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. So Stitcher, Spotify, of course, Apple Podcasts. Rate and review us there. 5 stars, please.
And thank you.
Yes, chef. Yeah.
Yes, chef. I think my favorite quote, and we haven't gone through this one yet, is there are no substitutions at Hawthorne.
Yes. Oh man.
Yes.
Nothing was worse being a waiter and having to go to the chef and be like, listen, I know you don't want substitutions, but this person really wants couscous instead of rice. Like, I know we have couscous. Can we put the salmon over the rice, like, or the couscous or whatever? Oh, there's nothing.
You're
There's
part of the
nothing worse.
problem.
Man, there's nothing worse than going into the kitchen with that news. Absolutely part of the problem.
Absolutely. Oh, well, thank you guys. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.